Yeah, Melissa, I am super excited to have this conversation. There has been, I think, over a year and a half that I've wanted to talk about Intel. And as you've seen my diatribes on LinkedIn, I'm extremely passionate about it. And I've tried to make it work with other friends, but this timing has been wrong. And I think when you posted your LinkedIn talking about Intel, I'm like, let me chime in. So thank you for responding and having that initial pre-call. But yeah, I'm super excited about this conversation.
Yeah, no, thanks for reaching out. I've been thinking a lot about it since, so glad gets the creative juices flowing. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it really does. So for those who have not read your post, can you provide a quick summary to kind of lay the foundation of what we're going to be going into?
Yeah. So I made a post after OSAC week, after hearing lots of different conversations about Intel and Intel professionals in the corporate intelligence environment and merely the corporate structure as a whole. And there were a lot of conversations about chief intelligence officer and sort of elevating intelligence professionals in their own field. But it has always struck me that we don't always see intelligence professionals sort of break out of that mold and wind up in other C-suite roles and really being positioned in other parts of the business to do those kinds of leadership roles that are outside of just an Intel remit. And it always occurred to me that we have a lot of skills. Intel professionals have a lot of skills that are really applicable for those kinds of roles. And, for whatever kind of reasons, we just don't always see Intel professionals in those spaces.
Yeah, no, thank you for that quick summarization. And I think you touch upon a lot of great things. And you might be the first person that's actually mentioned that. I know there is, and I forgot this individual's name. Oh my God. It was just at the tip of my tongue. But he previously wrote kind of a white paper on one of I think LinkedIn or something online talking about a chief intelligence security officer. This was maybe about 2 years ago. But then I think you are looking at it from a higher level, right? Running businesses and that risk calculation that we've been, I guess, ingrained with in our profession, I think would bode well in our current world in geopolitics, right? Because we do understand that risk calculation, and then we just have to marry that with obviously business understanding and fundamentals, right?
Completely. As you said, I mean, it's look at the world we live in today. The geopolitics of is everywhere. It's in everything. It's every part of the business. It impacts every function within a business. And chief intelligence or chief intelligence and security officer. There's a lot of utility to that too. But I think there are unique skill sets and knowledge sets that will put us in really good positions to take those other kinds of roles, those other, beyond intelligence roles, like a chief strategy officer, I think is a really interesting role for an intelligence professional. A COO, that's another, position. We have a lot of, never mind the geopolitical knowledge and sort of the world we're in today, but they need to solve complex problems and think second, third, fourth order effects of decisions. And those are all things that we are trained to do that are just part of the fabric of, how we think.
Right. No, I definitely agree with you on that. And to add additionally to what you're saying, I've been going knee deep into systems theory. I had a guest that was in the biomedical field that is a program manager in cybersecurity, and she mentioned systems theory. And I'm like, I'm kind of ignorant about that. Can you give me a quick overview? And she did. And ever since that conversation about a month ago, I've been diving deep into that because the second, third, and fourth order effects, that's something that we, I think, as a society, and obviously in cybersecurity, kind of in the micro, we don't pay attention to. But you and I, coming from, this field, we're thinking about that, right? So I think everything that you're saying is resonating with me. But let's kind of break up this discussion. Feel free to push back. because this is, give and take here. So let's focus part of it on your understanding of our capabilities and why we're not at those higher levels, right? That could be a part of it. And understand why, what's the environment like that is preventing us from attaining those higher levels. And then maybe at the back end, talk about the current problem of cyber threat intel programs in cybersecurity organizations. And, it's not about only mentioning the negatives and they're like, oh, this is crap, but then offering possible solutions as well. So, or like in our world, recommendations. Here's what we advise.
We could talk about that too. That's a whole other subset of this, providing recommendations versus information as a whole,
Yeah,
subset of what makes a corporate intelligence professional successful in their realm versus a government intelligence professional or military intelligence professional. But I love this deep dive because I've really had to think, in making that post, there were so many comments and interesting things that people like DM'd me about. And so it really generated good discussions. Going into the first part of your question, why don't we see that? Sort of why is that that you don't see Intel professionals in that space? And I keep leaning to one of the simpler examples, like one of the simpler reasons why somebody had left a comment and said there just aren't that many of us. And I thought, there might be something to that, that we are a smaller industry than maybe we realize, because it's, once you're on the inside, it's kind of hard to look bigger, and you think about how many CROs or CFOs there might be out there that are able to rise to those levels, or shift around into different C-suite levels. So I kind of like that as one reason, but I personally don't know that's exactly why we don't see it. I think there's multiple factors I kind of see at play. I
for
think
sure.
one is this feeling like, and I have it too. I deeply feel this, that I will always be an analyst at heart. It was the best job I ever had, was just being an Intel analyst, brand new, you know, fresh out of training and getting into that seat. And it's the best job I ever had. I loved it
Yeah.
so much. And I think there are so many of us that feel that way, about the discipline. And it's hard to, you just want to be that analyst forever. And it's hard to make that pivot away from it because you feel so close to it. And I think that I see that across a lot of people that I would think, are sort of on a path or maybe in a journey in that direction, and just can't really break away from that feeling.
Yeah, and I never really thought about it that way. But it's kind of leaning towards that individual contributor, verbiage as opposed to leading a team. So, yeah. The other one I hadn't heard of, but about not enough people in our profession. Um, yeah, that's another interesting, um, I guess, perspective. I guess what I lean on, being in cybersecurity for over 15 years, is that we're not allowed to shine. And what I mean by that, if we look at the history of technology and the internet, back in the 50s, 60s type of thing, and when security came into focus to say, whoa, what's going on here? It was that great book from, I think, The Cuckoo's Egg or The Cuckoo's Nest or something like that. It was this astronomer from, I want to say, Stanford, that noticed, it was almost kind of an analyst at heart, noticed a discrepancy of a couple of cents and went down the whole espionage rabbit hole. I'll try to get the book. But that's when we noticed that our adversaries, in this case, nation states, were targeting, trying to get intel at the end of the day, what we're doing. But so now you had people that created the networks, and now they had to wear a double hat and say, now you got to secure. They're like, well, I don't know how to do that. So being engineers, being smart individuals, they devised a plan to kind of sit on top of the infrastructure. And then what they did is start becoming teachers and educators. And then now that created that traditional path because a lot of people that I talk to, I don't come from that traditional path. And I push back. I'm like, what is the traditional path? And everybody says, you know everything about TCP/IP. You know everything about networking. All of that quote unquote foundational work, because that's what we've been teaching generation after, well, maybe not generations, but for the past, let's say 40 years, right? So then now the individuals have who learn from that or come from that background, they're teaching that. So you and I come from a whole different skill set. We don't come from that traditional background. So they're like, yeah, I want somebody who knows how to, who develop code. And we might know how to do that. I personally don't. But we lean to those hard skills and we don't look at, I guess, the holistic perspective of what life skills, the analysis, the communication, both written and orally. So that's kind of my take being in this industry, seeing, okay, who's getting promoted? Who's going up here? Who is not getting promoted? And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? I could be just talking nonsense.
No, I think there's it's twofold in my eyes. It's what we do to hold ourselves back. And then it's sort of what the structures around us that don't necessarily allow us to as you say, to shine, to get up to those levels. And I think there is a level, some of it is us holding ourselves back or, putting us in boxes, by way of the things you described and sort of that like, well, this is what an analyst looks like, or this is the traditional way, coming through the military is the way you get into intelligence and like that, that kind of like formula that I would argue is going away now anyway, whether we want it to be or not. But there's also the structures where they're holding us back to some degree, and I think some of that is on the old style, formulaic, traditional. This is how a cybersecurity professional comes up the path. This is how an intelligence professional or corporate security professional finds their way up the corporate ladder, or whatever ladder that might be. A lot of that I find is still driven very much by, and both you and I are from that tradition of government, law enforcement, military, really winding up imprinting on corporate environments and corporate global security environments and cybersecurity environments in ways that, I mean, when I got into private sector, I didn't expect that at all. In retrospect, now it makes perfect sense that that's what would happen. But I find that a lot of those sort of formulaic feelings, those traditional feelings, get overplaced into corporate environments by way of those same people that have come up in those traditions. I try not to be that person, but I think if you're really intentional about it, you can steer away from that. But there is something to the sort of the people, the powers that be, and the people in those positions that bring over that sort of tradition, that formula with them, and expect that to also play out in other environments as well.
Right? And it's about being adaptable, right? We tend to be rigid, and maybe that's just human nature, what we know, what we feel comfortable with. Well, I want to keep on doing that. I don't want to change. And I know some people are to a greater or lesser degree of where they feel comfortable with change. But I think as you're saying that, what started my path down this road was thinking ISAC, I don't know if it was healthcare, it must have been healthcare here in Denver. And there was this speaker that said how not to build a CTI program. Okay, let's see what you got. He totally lost me because the first thing that he said, he attacked kind of my ego, that whatever you did in government or military, don't do it. Don't try to replicate what you did. I'm like, whatever. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But then it took me a while for it to sink in, and talking to a lot of people, former colleagues, friends in different sectors. Oh, we don't talk with this team. We don't do this. We don't do that. And I'm like, And they're all from our traditional background. And I'm like, oh man, I think this guy was right. And I've been trying to get a hold of him. He might have been with the agency. I don't know, because I reached out to ISAC, the healthcare ISAC. I'm like, no, he didn't want to. He didn't share his slides. He didn't do anything. But I think with Osin, we can definitely look for him. That really shed the light, and then now I use that to really analyze the current employer that I was working with at the time, and I'm like, we're pushed to the corner to this within the SOC, Security Operations Center. I'm like, oh man. And this is where I kind of started developing my articles on LinkedIn to say, look, we're missing the value proposition of what we can do with this profession. But let's circle back. If you had the power, how would we get the profession to start filling those executive roles? What are some of the, I guess, potential, I hate using this term, but it's the only one that's coming through, roadmaps? What is kind of the potential path that we can take to start leveling up and showing the value prop of what we can provide global corporations?
Learn. I think that's the single biggest thing, is be willing to learn other things. Learn the business, learn what it means, like that, learn what it means when your company is saying they're making money. How are they making money? Is it ads? How are they constructing the financials around those ads? How are they selling them? Who are they selling them to? How is your company making money? And learn to speak those stakeholders' language, understand what the business is. In so many environments, intel security, cybersecurity becomes a service to the business. And that's all well and good. That's par for the course in some cases, but we don't always necessarily try our hardest to speak their language as well. We figure out ways to make our intel products, or the reports and things that we're providing them. I think we maybe lean towards like dumbing them down, for lack of a better word, and like diluting them to some degree
Right.
so that they're digestible to the stakeholder. But what we should actually not be, we should not be diluting them. We should be converting them into their language, and so that it makes sense to them. And then they see the value. They see you're not just a cost center, or you're not wasting their time by giving them an intel product. You're giving them something that's actually providing them value back into the business.
Mhm.
And I think, and by way of that, I think we often just think too small. Think bigger. Think beyond, beyond your remit. Think bigger than that. What other things kind of make sense? Actually, at OSAC, talked to somebody who's a head of intel at a big tech company,
Mhm.
and they have taken on trust and safety in addition to traditional sort of intel type work.
Mhm.
And that's pretty unconventional, because that's generally pretty squirreled away. But the way that he described it, it made perfect sense. The patterns and the tools and the professionals they needed were exactly the same.
Right.
It's just imprinting it in a different way. And so the business was completely in line, because he spoke the business's language and was able to translate to them why it made sense to do that, and think unconventionally and think bigger, outside of what would traditionally be acceptable in a company like that. And
Yeah.
so it's really learning and thinking bigger, I think, are the two things that for myself, I'm trying to like internalize, and I think others should really think that way. And those are the things that we can control, and that we can do to sort of think about how we might reach those levels, or at least influence at those levels. If you're not going to reach, maybe you don't want to, and that's totally fine. But if you want to influence at those levels, I think you still need to do that too.
Yeah, I love the think bigger, right? Think more strategic. And I know thinking strategic is a hard thing to do, but in my experience, a lot of the technical folks that are kind of in middle management or a little bit higher, they're super myopic. They're thinking in the weeds. Like, for example, a former boss would be inside the security tools. I'm like, what are you doing? You have hundreds of people that can do that for you. Why are you in these tools? And they couldn't give me a good answer. I think I know why they're in there, because they feel most comfortable there. and they might not be thinking bigger or asking those, like you said, those inquisitive questions to really understand where cyber fits from a business value prop versus the zeros and one that we tend to gush over here in cyber. Um, so no, I love everything that you're saying there. Um, the other thing I wanted to talk about, I'm actually doing a brain fart here, which I'll delete here.
You had a third, there was a third point.
Yeah, there was.
Um,
Man, listen, there's a lot of things that are going through my
I
head
know.
right now because I love this conversation. So, okay, let's shift towards um, the current state of cybersecurity. What has been your experience with your past? And one other thing I forgot to do a caveat. I don't know how I could do this. Whatever opinion stated in this episode of past, present, and future employers, there are opinions and they do not, coincide with our current or past employers. Opinions are our own. What have you seen in your experience and within your network on how Intel programs are currently being leveraged? Because I have a follow-up question depending on how you answer that.
It's a tough time. Um, there, there's a couple of similarities I see across lots of different organizations. The first, budget cuts. I think that's impacting lots and lots of people. That means
Yeah,
layoffs. That means restricting access to tools, to information, trying to consolidate in ways that make it really difficult to do the job that teams were doing before. There's definitely also within that narrowing size of teams and things as part of that as well, narrowing widening remits, narrowing teams, which just means, code for do more with less. There's a lot of that.
yeah,
But at the same time, there is also a recognition from C-suite leaders, and not just your CSO, across the C-suite. And this is proven. Like, there's multiple surveys. There's a CSO survey, which I highly recommend, by the Clarity Factory. That's really, really interesting to read and see how CSOs across many multinational corporations are thinking about intelligence and security. And there is a recognition at that level that geopolitics is a significant risk factor across the business, not just for a global security organization, but that's a significant risk factor. So simultaneously, doing more with less, but also recognizing that now more than ever, geopolitics is a significant problem, and something more important than it ever has been. So I don't know how you square those two.
yeah,
That's it's sort of mixed messaging. And the third piece, which I think ties in perfectly well with that. A lot of operations centers and watch floors are now being, because of budget cuts and because geopolitics is considered a significant risk area. Global security operations centers and watch floors are being asked to be more intel forward, more intel led. And a lot of times you're asking operators to be something that they haven't been trained to be, that they don't have the experience to do, maybe didn't sign up to do either, and really asking them to simultaneously do more with less. Geopolitics is a significant risk factor, but also be more intel led. And so I think that really puts uh, security and intelligence organizations into a extremely difficult position to try and figure out. It's easy to say, think bigger and drive speak your stakeholders' language. But
yeah.
when you're put under those pressures, I do recognize that there's only so much time in a day to try and do all the things that you're being asked to do now.
Yeah, I want to focus on that third one because I think I'm seeing something similar. You're having people that don't understand how to do Intel. And one question for you, Intel engineering, red team, purple team engineering. And I'm like, so I tend to be for the lack of a better term, a traditionalist on what an Intel person can do. And then there's this additional verbiage out there, maybe marketing verbiage, that Intel, domain takedowns, that's Intel. So what has been your, I guess, experience? What do you think about when Intel is being done by people that are not trained for it? And as an example, when I first went into one of the previous companies I worked for, domain takedowns, that was Intel. I'm like, okay, what else? That's how the Intel does. I'm like, man, huge opportunity, right, to do that. But what do you think about that, where Intel is doing things that maybe shouldn't, but maybe I'm just looking at it from a myopic perspective?
I think it kind of depends. There's, it's with the right tools and the right, training and leadership and things like that, you can get a GSOC to a place where they're being more Intel led and Intel forward and understanding context around situations, not just triaging alerts or triaging, door alarms and things like that, but they're thinking more contextual. What does this mean in a bigger picture?
Yeah.
So like there's one aspect I think which, is just an exercise of the brain versus, needing like specific training for things where you can start to ask those second, third order questions.
Would that be considered Intel, though? I think
It's a great question.
people outside of our profession will just say, "Oh, that's a good analyst. That's a good SOC
Yep.
analyst." So then, I
Yep.
guess how do we differentiate that?
Yeah, I mean, does Intel exist outside of the government? Is a question I really ask myself a lot.
Hmm.
Does Intel, as somebody who comes from the government space, as we might know it, does
Yeah.
that exist outside of government spaces? I don't know that I have an answer to that, but I have toyed with that.
Yeah.
And in my role now, tell you a quick story on this
Yeah.
because I think it's relevant. In my role now, dealing with lots of different companies and lots of different security teams, and had a company come and ask us some questions about a piece of analysis that we had written, and wanted to understand where they were coming from. Where are you getting your information from? This seems like it's beyond factual. Was sort of the the way they posed it. And so set up a meeting with them, had a conversation about it, and come to find out, they had come from a government background, had done like long time military intelligence.
Yeah.
I am that too, so I totally get it. But come to find out, they really focused on the fact that things were not written factually. There was opinion in it, and so well, it's not opinion, it's assessment, and that's different. And they said, well, it should. Where are the multiple sources? Corroborating sources and things. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you don't really get that outside of the government. That's a really
Correct.
hard
Yeah.
thing to get. And so, what is Intel in the government? An all
Mm.
source Intel analyst was like the thing everybody wanted to be for a while
Yeah.
there. And that's all these different pieces of Intel that you're puzzling together and sort of building connections and putting the puzzle together. Does that exist outside in that way? I don't know.
Mm.
So it's kind of like a different definition of what
Yeah.
Intel actually is, to your point. Because you're right, that is just an analyst. That's somebody that's analytically minded who can, dive in on second, third order questions and understanding context. But is that actually Intel? I don't know that it is.
Hmm. No, yeah, it's just fascinating when we dive deep into this. I remember I was interviewing a couple of years ago for telecommunication, and they asked me, what's more important, tactical or strategic? I'm like, oh, I know I'm going to fail this question. And I'm like, it's strategic. Why? I'm like, because if you don't have an understanding of your environment, you're going to be chasing the wrong fires tactically. Right. The one thing that I always, this analogy, because I've used a lot of analogies in cyber and talking to my legal team, they're like, oh, thank you for explaining that. And hopefully I'm creating, just like what you said at the beginning, that business value speak, again, for the lack of a better term, dumb it down with analogies. But one thing I always say, that everybody's looking down, doing the work, putting out fires and creating silos. And what do we do as an organization? We award people for how many fires you put out in a week, a month, a quarter, etc. Melissa, you put 40 fires out last week. Amazing job. Everybody gives kudos there. And then from a strategic standpoint, I'm like, what if we just pick up our heads and there's a massive window in front of us? What if over that hill, you have somebody with a lighter? Hey, imagine if we stop that individual. Now we're not putting out fires. And what adds to the to the burnout, like you mentioned, the people left and right of us have been laid off. So now we have to do not only our work, but their work and over here. But again, I think it's missing that bigger picture. So I answered strategically. And of course, I didn't get a call back, which at that point, these guys were, I think, more of the SOC analysts and not our background. So I knew where they were going with that. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I'm just going to sabotage my own interview here. But I stood my ground. I'm like, no, I know where you guys are going, because a lot of their questions were all super tactical, operational. Oh, one thing I wanted to kind of circle back. I blame the NSA analysts and Mandiant APT1 report. And why do I blame those? That started the whole Intel feeds, IOC feeds, and this threat intel platform industry to aggregate all these IOCs. But the analogy that I use, IOCs are like bank robbers. You and I are Bonnie and Clyde. We go rob a bank. You have a wig, I have a wig. I have facial hair. The next bank we rob, we change everything. But the bolo, be on the lookout for an Escalade, for a redhead, a Hispanic male. We change our attributes and the getaway vehicle. That's like changing the infrastructure. So one thing that nobody has really been able to answer, at least for my perspective, have IOCs ever been beneficial and said, "Ooh, we stopped this," unless it's like maybe 3 hours within the incident that systems were able to block it. But after that, infrastructure follows there. So that's what came out of the APT1 report. Again, amazing report, but then that put us into the box. And the NSAers, they came up with the diamond model, right? Again, great for government who needs to know who hacked us, attribution. But in the corporate world, maybe, there's always those individuals that want to know who hacked so we can hack back. That's a whole nother issue. But it's like, well, why do you care? And it goes into the legal function. Well, if it's nation state, we kind of wash our hands, right? So there is, circumstances when it comes to that. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of throw that out. And I want to talk to the NSAers that came out. And it's an amazing model. But I think that only works in government. And I've seen people in corporate America use it, on the social medias, they're talking. I'm like, I don't know how I should take that. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it is another model that makes sense for a government use case. And there are so many of those, those kinds of things. And it does, when you said that, I thought, well, who out there is actually like developing that model for a corporate function? They might be. They're developing it for their corporation because there is money to be made in doing that. And you're not going to share that knowledge, with another corporation to necessarily to have their business be as impactful. And so it's an interesting like dynamic there that
Hmm.
there's a lot more on the government side, willingness in some cases to sort of share, and we can all benefit from this kind of information. And there's not really
Yeah.
money to be made. We're trying to do other things. There's other missions, on the government side. But from a corporate perspective,
Yeah.
that's a different ballgame. And it does actually kind of goes to this concept I've been thinking a lot about, because I think it does drive a lot of the corporate security, cybersecurity, intel realm, is the needle in the haystack. Being so focused on finding the needle, finding that single actor, finding that, exactly as you said it, finding that Bonnie and Clyde, but actually you weren't really looking for Bonnie and Clyde in the first place. And
Mm.
you get so hyper focused on looking for the needle that you forget to see, the forest through the trees. As I think that's it's like a military phrase, but you get what it means. And that you forget to sort of look at the bigger picture, as you say, like, and try to put the fires out before they start. And you get so focused on the needle because the needle is the thing that might get you laid off or might ruin your team's credibility. Or if that, that's a high risk situation that could come out of that. And so I need to be focused on the needle because it matters to my livelihood and my
Yeah.
credibility in this company to find the needle. But actually, you wind up missing the bigger picture about what it actually means holistically.
Yeah, that's a valid point, and hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, I think with the current environment where you have to show that value, in this case, trying to find that needle, as opposed to, well, where does that haystack actually fit in the world? It's like I don't care. You're going down the rabbit hole. Just find that needle. Um, so I think what I'm hearing from you, Melissa, is that you and I have to develop a framework and sell it to corporations. And
Yeah. I was going to say out of the goodness of our own hearts, but we could sell it too.
no, here, yeah, it's about selling it for a lot of money there. Um, there was, so I have a presentation deck that I do locally here, that I think I have one next month, and it talks about Intel, on how it's a business enabler, and just kind of to your point about listening more, integrating into the business concepts. Like, for example, in my previous role, we started working with mergers and acquisitions. And it's like, well, how does Intel work there? Give us insight of who we're wanting to acquire. And then now we can do that open source research to say, hey, this company, you look at the job descriptions, they have the whole list of their security stack, which is a bad, a bad thing to do. You never want to put what exact tools that you're using. But then we're able to look that up. Oh, here's our partners. Let's just use Splunk. Then we can look at all the vulnerabilities. And then now we provide that to legal. So when they're having these discussions with these companies, hey, you use all these tools. Have you addressed all these vulnerabilities? You haven't? Then we're going to decrease the price. So that is outside of the government. We've never done that, obviously, for government
Knowledge is
space.
power.
There you go. There you go. I think there's just so much opportunity here that we need, in my kind of diatribes in my LinkedIn articles, I want to bypass middle management, because they're, I know I'm over assuming here, but it's like talking to a brick wall. They don't understand Intel. Intel belongs in a small little closet inside the SOC. That's it. That's all you do. Go find the domains and take them down. I want to start talking and reporting straight to the CISO and the board of directors to show that value proposition, moving forward there. That's kind of my high level, eye in the sky, North Star. initiative when it comes to Intel and then marrying it with yours to say, hey, we could run companies. We can be the CEOs. We can be the individuals making the informed decisions based on your Intel team there. So, Melissa,
Oh,
we
I
can,
wonder within that.
yeah,
I do have one question for
sure,
you
sure.
within
Yeah,
that, because this is a debate I see here and there.
yeah,
Uh Finding value, as you say, beyond middle management, sort of like, can I leapfrog them sometimes, or are there ways to get around that
yeah.
and get clever about, slipping reports on desks in certain places or showing certain things? What are your thoughts on that? Because there's a lot of discussion and sort of like working around those channels, which is great in some cases, but I wonder how realistic it really is,
Yeah,
or if it winds up biting you in the end.
so I struggle with that because, and even today I was talking to my senior manager. I'm like, oh, chain of command, right? Military, government. It's like, well, do you really want to bypass? And I'm trying to, I guess, move away from that. And it's not a matter of bypassing the chain of command. It's, hey, I have these ideas. Who's here to listen? And any opportunity that I have with the executives, here's what I'm going to do. Like, for example, the one pager, something that I got from a book. And that's another thing that there was an analyst that I used to work with. And I kind of throw this out too. Obviously, names would, I'm not going to mention. They told me, I don't like to read. I had zero response to that. I'm like, don't say anything mean. Don't say anything mean. And I'm like, well, you need to start. Is the only thing because knowledge is power. So the reason I mentioned that, I read a book. I'm a big gamer, 80s, so it's all Nintendo when time permits. But there was a book, a small little book by the CEO of Nintendo of America. I'm like, I'll be able to get some, geek knowledge. Turned out to be a business book. And I'm
Interesting.
like, and he started after college to Procter and Gamble, and it was a one pager. And it gave me PTSD because the one pager is a product that Procter and Gamble does to the executives, and his boss kept on putting red lettering, do it over, do it over. It was like 6 to 9 months, and it gave me PTSD because of our editors in government. It's like, what does talking about DDoS, what does volumetric mean? I'm like, it's a massive thing. Well, put it that way instead of using that word. I'm like, by the time it got released, I had to redo it all over again. It almost took 9 months to get that paper out. But it gave me insight on kind of the bottom line up front. The what, the so what, and what's next. And I've been teaching that to my teams and even colleagues. Look, we have a small bit of time to inform our key leaders. We can't give them a novel. We can't give them a strategic assessment. They're not going to read that. But so hopefully that answered your question. I think we need to shy away, and there are, I guess, professional ways of doing that without trying to sink your manager, well, this person doesn't know much, but any opportunities you have when you're talking to your manager's peers or higher level, that's where you have to take advantage of that and prep, a lot so you can start impressing them. Like, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. Melissa, you drove some value here. Let's have a separate meeting, right? And then now, if your current manager has issues with that, then that tells you more about them than what you've done.
Agreed. And
Uh,
I love a short, like a one pager, even better than that. Shorter than that is, the shorter the better. I had a boss, an old boss that we always wondered why he would do this strange formatting, or like use a highlight and bold and italics to highlight different parts of an email to, C-suite
mm,
executive. but he, in his head, he had an equation and he had a conversation with that executive already that
Yeah.
I'm going to highlight this, and that's the thing you need to take action on. And then the thing I really want you to read, if you don't have time to read, the other four sentences, just read the thing that's in bold. And it was just a way to quickly get information that, yeah, makes perfect sense. If that's
Yeah.
all they have time for,
Yep.
then they know exactly what they need to be pulling out of the information that you're sending them.
Yeah, no, I love that. It definitely makes sense. Melissa, we can talk, I think, for hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. Thanks for this conversation. I would like to get you back so we can talk about more on how to deliver this for corporations, and not only here in the US, but globally, right?
Yes.
Because the US is not the only country that is suffering from cybersecurity data breaches there. It's the entire world. And if we are able, kind of be evangelist of our profession, that's going to benefit global companies. And, we get paid there at the same time there.
I love
um,
it. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm happy to anytime. It's a great conversation.
Awesome. Again, thanks for being on the show, and we'll definitely do it again.
Thanks, Danny. It's been fun.